Okay, so what we want to talk about now is one of the most wonderful things I love to talk about, which is the cure for all disease. I mean, you know, that's my field. My dad was a doctor. His dad was a doctor. So, you know, my kids are into the healing arts. So we've got this lineage of being interested in, you know, biology and how it affects human physiology. So, lo and behold, one day I heard about this guy who said he had the cure for all disease. And I thought, that is preposterous and illegal, because only a pharmaceutical company can say they have a cure for anything. And so nonetheless, I checked it out, as the FDA did. And when the FDA went to check it out, they said, you know, we're kind of busy with other stuff. We'll get back to you. Just don't make a big ruckus, okay? And so Dr. Young said, okay. And I'm referring, of course, to the work of Dr. Robert O. Young, who wrote a book called The pH Miracle. And it has to do with the acid-alkaline balance of the blood as the way to heal the body. And, you know, there's a lot of information out about this, just like there's a lot of information out about, you know, a good metaphor to me is meditation. But the only reason any of us know about meditation or yoga really is because of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who brought and taught it to millions of people in the West. And that opened the floodgates for all the other pursuits of meditation and yoga. And in the same way, you'll see hundreds of different books and sources and opinions about pH. You know, people selling machines to pH the water and so on. But I like to go to the source. The only reason that information is out in the public domain was because of one guy, Robert O. Young, who did the primary research. And what he discovered really is mind-blowing. He discovered that the ocean of blood that nurtures all your tissues in your body is identical to the ocean of water on our planet that nurtures all the land. Pretty cool, right? So it's identical in its pH. It's different in its qualities, but it has, you know, a lot of the same components. But the pH is identical, 7.4. It's an alkaline pH. And as long as the pH of the blood stays alkaline, everything is hunky-dory and healthy in the body and in the ocean. But as soon as the pH drops into the acidic range, then we have catastrophe in the ocean. We have red tide, we have dolphins and fish killing themselves and beaching themselves. It's a catastrophe. And the same is true in the physical body when the pH drops into the acidic range, catastrophe happens. So the principle here, the prime directive of the human body is to keep the ocean of life alkaline. As long as the blood remains alkaline, then we have an optimal bloodstream and plasma to keep the body healthy. So if the bloodstream starts to inch into the acidic range, then the prime directive is violated. And since it's the prime directive, the whole body mobilizes. The whole body mobilizes instantly to realkalize the blood. Stop everything, realkalize the blood. That's what happens. And the mechanisms that the body has to realkalize the blood, Western medicine calls the symptoms of disease. It's not disease at all. It's the body trying to heal itself. But we look at it as disease, and then we treat the symptoms rather than the cause. So let's look at that. We're going to look first at what are those symptoms of disease. What happens? What are the prime, when we say the prime mechanism of the body is to keep the blood alkaline. So when the blood turns into the acidic range, what's the first thing the body is going to do? Well, it's going to say, well, geez, let's grab some alkaline minerals from somewhere else and throw it back into the blood. And so what's the first step of disease that you always experience is fatigue. Fatigue is the first step of disease, and the fatigue happens because the body, in its wisdom to try to heal itself, is saying, well, we don't really need this alkalizing mineral over here. We need it in the blood. Get it over to the blood. And so you start to get tired. And then if that isn't enough, then it'll start it'll go into the brain and rob alkalizing minerals out of the brain, and we'll have fogginess, mental fogginess. Same thing, body grabbing the alkalizing minerals out of the brain function and moving them to the blood to try and keep on the prime directive. Now, fatigue and fog will have extremes. You know, it's one thing to be tired at the end of the day. It's another thing to go on day after week after a month and get exhausted. And then clinically chronic fatigue where you just can't even get out of bed and you're disabled. Okay, so that's the extreme version of this, of fatigue. Same with fogginess. Why'd I come in here again? Where are my car keys? Let's see, I just read this paragraph and I got to go back and read it again. And now I'm back at the end again. I have to read it again and I have to read it again. And, you know, mental fogginess. And to this then would be emotional disruption. Anger, upset, anxiety, hypertension. And then since I'm so fatigued and exhausted, I need more coffee. And then, of course, a cigarette goes with that. And then I'm like a raw nerve, like a cat with its claws out by the end of the day. So why? Because the body's trying to heal itself by taking the alkalizing minerals that are now deficient and putting them back into the blood. And when there's not enough to go around, and we still got these acid toxins coming into the body, the next step is fat. The body will create fat adipose tissue to store the toxins. That's why you've always heard, don't eat the fat on the meat. Okay, you cut the fat off. Why? Not because eating the fat will make you fat. Okay, we know that's not true. This whole thing about fat-free foods, fat-free foods, right? They've now said, oh, we're so sorry. We were wrong. It's killing people. Right? Just like margarine. It's better than butter. Right? So, you know, this was when most of us were kids. This was, you know, the margarine thing came out like in the 60s. Oh, whoa, can't eat butter. Eat this margarine. Oh, 10 years later, so many millions of people killed for margarine. Go ahead and eat the butter. You know, this whole attempt by, you know, pharmaceutical companies to control the food chain, right? So fat, they say cut the fat off, not because it'll make you fat, but because the fat contains up to 10 times the toxic density of the meat. Why? Because the meat has to, the body in its wisdom has to keep the meat, what's meat? Muscle. Okay, it has to keep this muscle active. I got to breathe. I got to pump the blood. I got to move around. I got to eat Okay, those require muscles, and those muscles have to stay active or the body's going to die. So if we got toxins, acids invading the body and we don't have enough alkalizing minerals to alkalize the blood, then we got to store these toxins and get them out of the blood. Put them in fat, create fat, and we'll create fat. Now, each body is a little different. You have a genetic predisposition to fat. Some people store their fat externally. They're lucky. Some people don't. Some people, instead of externally around the hips, will store it internally around the heart, the liver, and the arteries. Much worse problem. Okay, I'm that body type. I'm kind of a thin, scrawny guy, right? So, and there are people like that. Other people will store it externally. So, what happens if the onslaught of acid continues and the fat is not enough? Because you have a genetic predisposition to where you're only gonna take on so much fat. I mean, you see these people who are like, I don't know, the biggest person, 400 pounds, can't get through the door. It's a real genetic anomaly. We don't all go there, right? You have a limit to how much fat you're going to get on your body, and then it's going to start going internal. Unless you're an internalizer, and then you start getting an internal before you get it external. Whichever way it is, if you keep taking on too much acid, then what happens is it starts oozing back into the muscles because the fat can't hold it any longer, and then you've got sore muscles. That sore muscle that never heals up. That's called clinically fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia, right? Lactic and other acids that are invading the muscles that shouldn't be there. And then if that continues downstream for a few more, however long it takes, could be weeks, months, or years, then we're going to see that acid moving in from the muscles to the joints. You got joint problems. What's that called? Gout and what? Arthritis, exactly. Arthritis. Okay. It's the same thing, right? You see it. It's a progression. And then if we've got acid rushing down the veins, right? Acid is caustic. It eats away things. So what's it doing? You've got a artery, right, which is carrying acid blood. It's going to start eating away at the artery. So what is the body in its wisdom to protect itself? We got to patch that up. Let's create some triglycerides, right? So you have an artery, right? And you have little holes starting to create. So the body says, whoa, this bleeding internally is worse. So let's create triglyceride fats to start plugging those things up. And then if that doesn't work, because it's starting to eat the sides of the arteries, let's create plaque on the arteries. And if they still insist on killing themselves, then let's create a specialized fat from the liver to go just into the artery. That's called cholesterol. HDL and LDL, cholesterol. Right? So that's down here. And that means cardiovascular disease, inflammation, pain, suffering. And then as a last resort, in a desperate attempt to try and salvage the body in its wisdom will start to cannibalize the bones and take the calcium right out of there. What do we call that? Exactly. Right. Osteoporosis. So all this, step by step by step, fatigue to fog to fat to fibromyalgia to gout to arthritis to cholesterol and cardiovascular disease to osteoporosis. And then what's next? Cancer. Right. Cancer. It's like, oh man, what are we going to do with all this sludge? At a global level, it's the Pacific garbage patch, and it's the nuclear waste dump, and it's these damn injection wells. I mean, they're like injecting toxins thousands of feet down into the water table. It's like, and getting away with it. So you know. So these steps of disease are crystal clear, and they are based on the body trying to heal itself to keep the main directive, which is alkaline blood. That's all this is. The body trying to heal itself to restore alkaline bloodstream. It started nice and simple enough and then progressed into incredible disease. And as this progresses, we see an amazing thing happen. Just an amazing thing as this moves from alkaline to acid. We see the body shift from the growth stage to the decay stage, right? So there's a yin-yang in the natural world. Doesn't take, you just look outside and you'll see it anywhere. There's growth or decay, and everything's on some continuum of growth and decay. So you have a seed grow to a stalk, to a sprout, to a stalk, to a proliferation, to a bud, to a blossom, to a fruit. Those are the 7 stages of progression of time, you remember, from the Genesis pattern and the Mayan calendar. So at that 7th stage where we have a fruit, which is the peak of the growth stage of anything, boom, it falls to the ground. Suddenly the growth stage is over, and a whole new set of natural laws takes over called the decay stage. And what causes the decay stage? The undertakers of the natural world. Suddenly, they march down and take over. Yeast, mold, fungus, bacteria, parasites. Their job is to recycle tissue back to the soil. That's why when you drive down the road and you see a squirrel dead, and you come back a month later, it's gone. It's gone because something else ate it. And who ate it? The undertakers of the natural world. Yeast, mold, fungus, bacteria, parasites. They're the vultures of the natural world, the recyclers. Thank God for them. So what happens as the acid pH progresses here? We see a proliferation of these bugs take over the body. And each stage, an increase of that. And it's amazing. I mean, basically, it's Mother Nature saying, well, this guy's dying, so let's just hurry it up, will you? Let's produce some yeast and mold and fungus and bacteria and parasites and just speed it along and recycle this dying person back to the soil. And then we start to see a systemic breakdown. We see, the bowels, starts in the bowels with dysbiosis and farting and burping and constipation and gas and bloating. And then it moves, to the liver. And then we have hormonal problems and PMS and sugar problems. And, and then it'll move maybe to the lungs and I can't breathe, and asthma, and then bronchitis, and then headaches. And it's just, it's these bugs moving around the body, digesting the body, rotting the body to recycle it. Dr. Young, there's talk of him getting a Nobel Prize for his discovery of this, because what he discovered is under a microscope. See, our whole medical system is based on antibiotics, based on fixed bacteria that you get a fixed antibiotic to kill. And this is heresy to them, because what he's saying is that he said that these yeast, mold, fungus, and bacteria are progressive based on the pH of the blood. In other words, he said you can take a red blood cell, and as the pH starts to move down into the acidic range, that healthy red blood cell is going to get shriveled like a prune, and then it's going to look like a donut. Well, that's cool. What's that donut? It's not a donut. It's that white hole in the middle, like a donut, but instead, it's a white yeast cell that births out of the red blood cell. Preposterous. Unbelievable. And then, he said, that yeast cell will morph into a raw bacteria. It's just absolutely unbelievable. I mean, they said he's crazy. Burn him at the stake. For real. That's what I'm saying here for those who aren't familiar with microbiology. This is like having a cat at home and then going to the supermarket and buying dog food and feeding the cat dog food and coming back the next morning and seeing the cat has turned into a chihuahua, has turned into a dog. It just doesn't happen. It's a different species. Yeast and bacteria and red blood cells. Red blood cell isn't even an organism. It's a frickin' organ. It's a tiny organ, but it's not even a living creature. And yet, the red blood cell itself will turn into a yeast cell, and the yeast will change species into a bacterium. It's like no one would believe it unless they hadn't seen it. You can see this on video microscopy. And it's like got the whole medical world turned upside down. It's like, you know, it just gets rid of antibiotics. That's why antibiotics don't work. You know, they create these monster creatures. So now you know why I'm at the National Candida Center. Right? It's the foundation of everything. It's like, you know, Candida starts like right here and it just starts consuming the body and accelerates this process. So, if this... That's why sugar is so bad and makes it worse. Feeds the yeast. So, if this is the progression of disease, say this is dismal. If that's the progression of disease, the good news is if we know how to walk down the stairs, we can reverse it and walk back up the stairs and get to a healing modality. And we do. I've seen people with stage 4 lung cancer given 4 weeks to live, sent home because, you know, we've cut them with surgery, we burned them with radiation, we've chemoed them out, and by the way, your insurance has run out, so sorry, go home to die. You know, what hope is there? But those people at that extreme level completely turn around and walk back up the stairs and regain their life through.
Where that staircase is something like the neurological degenerative diseases like multiple sclerosis or something like that.
All that's extreme, right? That's a complete breakdown. Alzheimer's, MS, cancer, they're all in the same boat. That's like the body giving up. The systems are breaking down, you know. It's like a fire in the house. You know, suddenly the electricity shuts off, and then the plumbing's down, and then the roof falls in.
Do you have someone with alkaline blood that has MS?
No. Right. You won't have anyone who's sick unless they have acidic, toxic blood.
So, for example, I think I produce a lot of acidity because I don't take Proloseq every morning.
Let me go on, and we'll see how this fits in. So, the way we go back up the stairs is to first of all identify the cause of the problem. The cause of the problem is clearly over-acidity. So, what's causing over-acidity? 3 things: imbalanced way of living, an imbalanced way of eating, or an imbalanced way of eating. Living, thinking, or what was the first 2 I said? Living and living. Okay. Yeah. So, okay, an imbalanced way of living. Okay, a cop on the beat, a soldier in the field, a 3rd grade school teacher. I mean, geez. You know, the ET teachers, you know, honest to God, teachers. You know, I go in and volunteer at the 1st grade all the time. These teachers deserve $100,000 a year. I mean, you know, it's unbelievable what these teachers do to, yeah, pink slip Rick. Anyway, we digress. So, a stressful way of living, right? Driving down, you know, a 9-to-5 job where you got to drive on the interstate to work every morning. Stressful living, stressful thinking. woe is me. What's wrong with me? Why does this always happen to me? I'm no good. Jeez, I should have done what my mother said. The whine, okay? Most people are not even aware that there's a whiner living in there. You know, that constant noise in the background that's always talking. You know, I say that to people, to patients, you know, I don't have anybody talking. What noise are you talking about? You know, meanwhile they're thinking, what's he talking about? You know, I don't have any noise in my head. Oh, you mean that? Me talking to myself. The background noise. The radio that's always on. Why do you think people have radios on all the time? Or TVs on all the time? It's because that's what's going on in their head all the time. It's this automatic mental garbage. So the first step is becoming aware of that to shift it. So imbalanced way of thinking. By far the most acidic, toxic thing that we can do. All that thinking will create acidic toxin in the body. But the most powerful thing about it is imbalanced way of eating. Okay, so to understand how that's influencing us, we have to look at the pH scale. And the pH scale is how we measure acidity. Okay, like that's how we measure fluids. Like gas, we measure by temperature. Like it's 78 degrees in, you know, the room. We measure gas by temperature. We measure fluids by pH. And you have tons of pH. You have tons of, well, not tons. You have many fluids in your body. You know, so you have people who are jumping on this bandwagon, selling all these things, writing all these books, alkalize the body. We don't want to alkalize the body. That's a lie. It's incorrect. It creates disease to alkalize the body. We're not interested in alkalizing the body. We're interested in alkalizing the blood. Okay, you got all kinds of fluids and humors and viscous things. You got semen and snot and tear ducts and sweat and liver bile and, you know, it gets pretty interesting. Lots of stuff. Feces and urine. They're not supposed to be alkaline. Some are supposed to be alkaline, some are supposed to be acid. What we're after in this discussion is to keep the prime directive of the human body, and that is the blood alkaline. So for that we use the pH scale. So the pH scale is numbered 1 to 14. 1 to 6.9 is, or 1 to 7 is acid, and 7 to 14 is alkaline. And that's what's called the pH scale, which is short for parts hydrogen, and how many free-floating electrons are in there depends on how much acid is in there. So what we want to do is look at our food chain. Well, most natural foods that you get at the supermarket or in your garden are in the 6 to 7 to 8 range. Almost all natural foods are in there. There's some a little higher, some a little lower. But most of them are in there. You know, so you think of your normal foods, your celery, your broccoli, your cucumber, your squash, your this, your that. They're all in this natural range of 6 to 7. And the body can handle that. But then you get down into the 5 to 6 range, and you have milk. And you get down in the 4 to 5 range, and you've got cheese. And you get down into the 3 to 4 range, and you've got coffee. Oh dear, oh dear. And then you get down in the 3 to 4 range, and you've got alcohol and vinegar. Around 3. And then you get and vinegar down around 3, and then you get into carbonic acid in its most familiar form, Coca-Cola and Pepsi, soft drinks, carbonic acid. Doesn't matter if it's Coke.
Anything carbonated?
No, and well.
Like, in other words, I have this carbon cartridge my daughter gave me, soda water.
Yeah, that's carbonated. It's carbonic acid. Right. So yeah, and then when you add sugar to it, 30 grams of sugar. Why do you think there's 30 grams of sugar in Coke? It's to cover up the acid. And if it's not sugar, then it's aspartame. Right. Yeah. Well, aspartame is an acid. It's a man-made chemical. Look, my position on man-made things is pretty clear. They're deadly. I mean, even an aspirin, a lowly aspirin, will create bleeding in the stomach. All man-made chemicals are plastic that create death in the body sooner or later. All pharmaceuticals are safe. And aspartame, Splenda, all these artificial chemicals are very acidic. And not just acidic. So what does acidic mean? We've already learned from the progression down the steps, acid creates fat. So what happens this is mind-blowing research. When you take diet food and diet drinks, in 40 to 60 minutes later, you're absorbing more carbohydrates, not less. It's making you fatter by drinking, diet sodas. Yeah. So, yeah. Right. So now you can educate them on the fact that those kind of things will actually make you fat, and the research is available. Instead of those kind of things, I recommend xylitol. Xylitol. Xylitol is a natural sugar that is unique on planet Earth. There's there's categories of food. There's food, and then there's superfood, and then there's downright miracle foods. Xylitol is a miracle food. Really? Okay. We have the Nazis to thank for xylitol. Yes, the Nazis. Just doing their job, recycling the planet, just like the yeast, mold, and bacteria. Xylitol, the reason I say that about the Nazis is when they went into Scandinavia and, ravished the people in the countryside, the people were left with nothing, and then they went back to what they were doing in the Middle Ages, which was to get sugar from the larch tree, the birch and the larch tree, the bark, and that's where xylitol comes from. It's a natural substance, and it has amazing properties. This is like amazing. Okay, all the sweeteners on Earth, and by that I mean all the sweeteners on Earth. Stevia. I have a stevia plant sitting out there in my garden, by the way. A stevia, maple syrup, honey, all good, nice stuff here. But still, in this group that does, they're all the sweets in the natural world do two things. It doesn't matter whether it's stevia, maple syrup, honey, brown sugar, white sugar, high fructose corn syrup, glucose, sucrose, molasses, any sweetener at all that's natural is in this agave. Thank you. The New Age agave. All of these things do two things. All of them do two things. Now, they'll do it to different degrees. Agave is going to do it a lot less than high fructose corn syrup. But they still do two things. They stimulate the growth of bacteria, because bacteria eat sugar, and these are sugars, and they will stimulate the growth of bacteria, pathogenic bacteria, and they will spike insulin. They will affect blood sugar, absolutely, every single one of them. Xylitol is in a category here all by itself. It's the only sweetener on Earth that does not do these two things. In fact, it does just the opposite. It's like a miracle. Excuse me. A miracle food. It inhibits pathogenic bacteria and promotes the growth of probiotic bacteria, because it operates as a an oligosaccharide. It's an actually prebiotic, which the probiotic anaerobic bacteria feed off of. So it inhibits pathogenic bacteria, promotes probiotic bacteria, and it's not metabolized in the same way as sugar. So it doesn't require insulin. Insulin is required to metabolize sugar. Your body creates insulin to grab a glucose molecule from the bloodstream and move it through the cell wall into the cell. That's what insulin does. It's that transport mechanism. So xylitol doesn't need that. So xylitol is injected into the bloodstream in Europe. Xylitol's been around since World War II and used throughout the world. Those Scandinavians, right. So they've been using this forever over there. And of course, it's been kept out of the United States by Big Sugar for 40, 50 years. Yes. Sucks, right? Because you go to the high school over here, and for lunch there's a vending machine where they can get Coke, Pepsi, orange drink, and chips instead of a salad over here, and candy bars, right? That's the difference, and that's also why dentists recommend taking xylitol before bed, after you brush your teeth, which is crazy. Imagine giving your kid a teaspoon of sugar before bed. You'd wake up with cavities and bad breath. Okay, if you wake up with bad breath in the morning, it's because of bacteria in the mouth, which create gum disease and cavities. In Europe, Scandinavia specifically, they've done longitudinal studies, 30 years. There's several 20 and 30-year studies. It's a long time. Studying xylitol effect on children who were fed as in their formative years. That means before 12. And kids who were fed xylitol before 12 grow up as adults without any gum disease or any cavities. Their teeth are strong, their gums are strong, and there's no diabetes. The diabetes epidemic is in the United States, not in Europe. So, now, there's one caveat, okay? Would I recommend you go out and buy xylitol today? Absolutely, you bet. I sell it in our clinic. Make sure everyone gets it. But if you have dysbiosis or a dysfunction of the bacterial inner ecology, and you eat xylitol, it can create an upset stomach, burping, or gas, maybe even diarrhea. Depends how bad your dysbiosis is. So you have to introduce it slowly. Dysbiosis means you have a lot of bad bacteria or parasites or yeast in there that's going to feed off sugar. Well, this doesn't feed sugar, it feeds probiotics. But if you don't have a lot of probiotics in there, or if you have just very few and they try and thrive in this toxic environment, they're going to create conflict and it could create upset. So what you need to do when you introduce xylitol is buy a bag of xylitol and buy a teaspoon. That breaks down to an eighth, full teaspoon, half teaspoon, quarter teaspoon, eighth of a teaspoon. And start with an eighth and increase by an eighth every day. In a glass of water. Take an eighth of a teaspoon, a glass of water, stir it up, drink it, swish it around your teeth, swallow it. Tomorrow, 2/8, which is a quarter. Next day, 3/8, half. And within 8 days, you'll be up to a full teaspoon that you can have any time, and you're fine. So that's the story on xylitol. Pretty cool, right? Okay, but we digress. So back to the pH. We're talking about how foods create an acidic problem in the blood. We can see that this is the case because 80% of our diet, what we call the standard American diet, SAD, the SAD diet. It's true. The SAD diet, right, is right here. 80% of it is milk and cheese. Okay, milk is half and half. It's regular milk. It's cream. It's cottage cheese. It's yogurt. It's kefir. It's ice cream. And then wheat, okay, wheat as an acidic thing is down around 4. Okay, processed wheat. White flour, which means cookies, cakes, crackers, croutons, donuts, rolls, pastas, noodles, pretzels. Oh, pretzels. Absolutely. I mean, cookies, cakes, crackers, croutons, donuts, rolls, breads, noodles, pastas. It's all of it, right? And what is that? It's yeast food. That's all it is. You're just feeding the yeast. It's really not you who's hungry for those things. It's bugs lining the intestinal tract saying, feed me more white flour. Oh, jeez. So, no, salt, but, salt is an alkalizer. So, soft drinks. Soft drinks. Soda. Yeah, soda. Now, what's one on the pH scale is hydrochloric acid and sulfuric acid. Okay, this is just one more thing below. And which is your battery acid in your car, sulfuric acid, and hydrochloric acid is in your stomach. No, don't. No. But you've got it. HCl, I'll supplement people with HCl. Most people we supplement with HCl because they have so efficiently put out their stomach fire. Their fire in the belly is gone. It's like flat. It's so, they can't even digest peanut butter. There's so little acid. And therefore, that opens the whole intestinal tract to this plethora of bugs. So we usually have to restore the acid to ignite the gastric fire so it can eat all this stuff up and then change into a food chain that is up around 6, 7, or 8, an alkalizing food chain. If you want to get healthy, you know, if you want to walk back up the stairs from disease that we were talking about all the way to the top of the stairs and back to at least neutral, and then go to health, then we need to cut all these things out. You cannot get healthy eating these things. Now,
What happened to the red wine thing? That's it, as I read, it's an extreme remedy for an extreme problem. Right?
yes, just like vinegar. Now, here's why this is so interesting also, by the way. Here's why, we're not just talking 1 through 6 here. This is like the Richter scale, okay? That means it's exponential, okay? So that means milk, or 6, is 10 times more acidic than 7. 5 is 100 times more acidic than 7. 4, which is coffee, is 1,000 times more acidic than a glass of water. 1,000 times more acidic than a glass of water. And then we get down to 3, which is alcohol, 10,000 times more acidic. A glass of Coke, 100,000. And then lastly, pure acid, 1,000,000 times more acidic at a 1. Yeah. So that's... So, look, my position on the third dimension is party on. I mean, listen, we're here to live life, to screech to an end and hit the wall, woohoo. Honestly, that's my position on life. However, when you're got 4 flat tires and the car's rattling and the doors are falling out and the mirrors are broken, who wants to ride in a car like that, right? So it's the responsibility of each of us to take care of our body and heal it, and then absolutely margaritas and ice cream and whatever the hell else you want to eat. But you have to eat it in moderation once the body is healed. Get the body healed and able to digest nails, and then eat nails or margaritas or sugar or ice cream or whatever else you want. But, don't think you're going to get there eating these things. Now, we have seen some very interesting clinical pearls, and that is that diet is not enough. Diet is not enough. You know, I see people all the time who have been on like this yeast diet, this alkalizing diet for months, and they, honest to God, deserve a Medal of Honor for their yogic Spartan, you know, don't touch that because it has a gram of sugar in it type people, right? And then they go out, you know, it's a birthday party, and they go out with a friend and say, you know, I've been on this Spartan strict diet for 6 months, so, you know, I deserve a, you know, I'm with my friends, a beer or a piece of cake and, you know, or some ice cream, and then an hour later, oh, you know, it's all back. You know, stomach ache, farting, burping, bloating. They say, well, what's the point? I've been on this diet. Well, what happened was the bugs that were living in there were just went into remission and just hung around and wait to be fed. So my point here is that your diet is essential, but it's a component. We've seen that diet is essential, but you must have the right supplements and the right sequence as well. So what Dr. Young discovered is, well, how can we reverse this then? You know, if we cut out all the junk, right, then how do we reverse this intense acidity? I mean, eventually the diet will do it in 10 years, but, you know, in a strict Spartan way. But who wants to wait around 10 years? You want to get it done like in 6 months. So for that, we introduce something miraculous. And what he found was this really, truly miraculous, again, link between the human kingdom and the natural kingdom. Just like the link between blood and the oceans, he found that the blood of the animal kingdom is red because of hemoglobin. And you look outside and you see all the green, beautiful trees and grass. They are green because the blood of the plant kingdom is chlorophyll. So he said, well, that's interesting. So let's look at those two things. And he looked at chlorophyll and hemoglobin as molecules and discovered that they are not similar. They're identical. Identical. They have the same number of atoms, the same carbons, oxygen, hydrogens. They're in the exact same configuration. They're identical molecules. The only difference is in the center of hemoglobin is a solitary atom of iron. And in the center of chlorophyll is a one atom of magnesium, which is an alkalizing mineral. So what he found is, he says, wow, that's hot. He says, that means that if we drink chlorophyll, we can make new hemoglobin and new red blood cells, which means more oxygen and less toxins. He says, well, let's test it out. So he went to the food chain and found that there were 250 chlorophylls. You know, you walk into the supermarket and you'll see, you know, tons of, you know, I got broccoli and, you know, kale and spinach and celery and this and that and cilantro, and test them all. They're green, they got chlorophyll, let's check them out. So he did that empirical evidence, and he threw out 200 of them. And because either they were not bioavailable, that means it took too much energy, the body rejected it, it didn't get into the bloodstream, or worse, it created an acidic effect on the body. And that's the ones that did that were mostly the sea algae. The sea algae like spirulina, chlorella, and blue-green algae, which they're acidic to the blood. Oh, really? Seaweed salad, okay, that or adame or noni, or not noni, but you know, all the sea vegetables are sea vegetables. That's different. The what? Adamani and Anunnaki. Exactly. They're vegetables. We're talking sea algae. Spirulina, blue-green algae, and chlorella, and any of the algae. What do they do in the sea? They do the same thing in the sea that yeast does on land. They digest and eat things, and they create an acidic effect in the blood. Now, you don't want them in your body. Occasionally, you might use chlorella in a short-term basis for a heavy metal detoxification protocol, but only in conjunction with other things and someone who knows what they're doing. But as a general rule, no chlorella, no blue-green algae, and no spirulina. Now, if you go to the health food store, like I have, and look for their greens, that's the always, and every one of those ones, doesn't matter if you go to Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, anywhere, multi-level marketing companies, you're going to see, and usually the first 6 ingredients will be spirulina, blue-green, or chlorella, because they're cheap, easily available, and you can just scoop them out of the swamp and grind them up. Okay, well, we don't want those. Instead, he threw all 200 of these out and got left with 49 greens, chlorophylls, that do alkalize the blood, that do promote the growth of hemoglobin, and that do vitalize and heal the body. Those 49, he put in a product called Super Greens, da-da-da, that he markets, Super Greens. So that's his product. That's what I use. I don't use anything else because, why use anything else? That's it. He did the research. He knows what he's talking about, and that heals people. So now, any one of those individual components will work, too, in a limited fashion. The number one, so you're familiar with some of those: wheatgrass, barley grass, shave grass, moringa. All those are helpful and alkalizing. His research shows it the best. But to get them all together in that form, in that powder or capsule, is what we've seen the biggest results from. As long as you're drinking it at the proper rate. And what's the proper rate? Half your body weight in fluid ounces daily. Okay? So if I'm 120 pounds, half my body weight is 60, right? If I'm not getting 60 ounces of fluid every day, then I just don't have enough fluid to get rid of my metabolic waste. That means I'm increasing my acid. That means I'm walking down these stairs. The first thing I'm going to do is feel fatigue, and then mental fogginess, and then take on excess weight, and then da-da-da-da-da. Why? That's a lot of ounces of water. Well, but water, we're not talking just water. We're talking alkalized water with greens. Okay, chlorophyll water. There's no water enough is like eating the right foods. It's good. It's better than nothing, but it's not enough. Super greens. Dr. Young's super greens.
In my Fiji bottle is fine.
The what?
In my regular water.
In your water, yeah. Super greens, right. A scoop of greens per quart. So again, using that analogy, if I'm 120 pounds, half that is 60. 60 ounces is what? 2 quarts. 32 ounces in a quart, right? So that's 2 quarts a day. Spread through the day. That's not that much water. You just sip it every half hour. You carry it with you and just sip it every half hour. And what do we see from that? We combine the super greens with the proper alkalizing diet. We start to see people walking back up the steps of disease into full vitality and grace. Quick. You take some super greens, you'll feel charged in 40 minutes. That fast.
How fast do you see them turn alkaline?
Well, it depends how sick they are, I mean, I have people coming to me who have been, with, MS and, crippled and say, do I gotta quit smoking cigarettes? Really? I mean, can't we be done with this? We've been at it a week. I mean, really, we expect things quick. But realistically, most people, 6 months. Change of the diet, add the supplement, and, clean things up, and you'll know if you're healthy or not. So let's see. Anything else on the pH? No, I think that about does it. So that really summarizes the pH miracle, the new biology, everything having to do with diet, greens. The other green I'd recommend is moringa, which I also have over there on the desk. Yeah, moringa is a plant that grows here in Florida. You can grow it, and it's what the United Nations uses for starvation. They ship moringa in. Moringa is the most nutrient dense plants, one of the most nutrient dense plants on earth. It's called the elixir of life. It's they give it to, again, women who don't have enough milk for their babies, not enough nutrition to nurture their babies. They give them moringa. They cook it, they eat it, the babies get healthier. It's full of minerals and vitamins. It's like this miracle food. So it's good enough for the UN to save starving people. We find that it's highly alkalizing and it's highly nutritious. So it's a little different than the super green. It's providing nutrition and some alkalization, and the super greens are providing intense alkalization. So together, they work pretty good, as long as the diet is being observed.
So if we start eating a more
Yeah, let me say this before that. The last thing I want to say, everything I've just said is in Dr. Young's book called The pH Miracle. We make sure every person who comes on our door reads that. And it's also on the website, the nationalcandidacenter.com. Nationalcandidacenter.com. There's a link called pH Miracle, and this whole lecture is there, so you can read it and download it. And there's also then a link to Candida Diet and all kinds of recipes on alkalizing foods that come from his institute. So people will spend, $3,000 a week to go to his institute to heal from cancer. Which is good if you need that level of, intervention. But most people can do this at their home alone with, diet, with the information. And the information's online.